Hey guys, this is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with our Benny's Bats section for Sunday, July 19th. There's a lot of aces up on the mound today, so there's not a ton of bats. Bats are at a little bit of a premium today, but there are some guys in good spots that I wanted to point out. What we try to do in this bats section is help you make your short list of guys that you should be looking at when you're building your rosters today. So we'll go over pitchers one by one, talk about what their weaknesses are, and talk about the hitters that profile best against them on the opposing team. The first guy I want to talk about is Patrick Corbin. Corbin's a left-hander from Arizona going up against San Francisco. He's allowed a lot of home runs so far to right-handed bats. One guy who I definitely think is in play is Buster Posey. He's going to be the top catching option on the day. Posey is a guy who usually gets off sometimes on Sundays, but Andrew Susac, the other catcher for San Francisco, was injured yesterday and looks like he's headed for a DL stint. So if Susac's going to be out, there's a good chance that you're going to see Posey in the lineup today, probably hitting in his normal cleanup spot and definitely in a good spot against a guy like Corbin. Gets a park bump moving over to Arizona, and as we said, Corbin struggles with home runs to right-handed bats, and one thing we do know about Posey is he's one of the best offensive catchers that we do have in the game. The other guy who makes a lot of sense on San Francisco to me is Brandon Crawford. Even though Crawford's a lefty, he's been hitting left-handed pitching incredibly well this year. Has a 393 WOBA and a 229 ISO score, and he's somebody that goes lower owned than he really should based on what he's been able to produce this year. He doesn't hit too highly up in the order, and his price has come up a little bit, so there are a couple knocks on him, but I think that only goes to keep him lower owned, and he's probably one of my favorite tournament options that you can use today at the shortstop position. Next guy I want to talk about is CC Sabathia. Sabathia has been horrible at home this year, and he's been horrible against right-handed bats. Right-handers are hitting .331 against him with 18 home runs and 75 innings pitched. That's a problem for him today because he goes up against one of the best right-handed power bats in the game. Nelson Cruz for Seattle has a 521 WOBA with a 403 ISO number against left-handed pitching. He has 7 home runs and only 67 at-bats so far and is hitting well over .330 so far on the year. He's somebody who's always hit left-handed pitching well and is definitely going to be somebody who I think is one of the lower home run props on the day once that comes out from Bovada. He's probably my top option in the outfield today. He's only $4,400 on DraftKings, $3,400 on FanDuel, so the price is not too restrictive. And with the upside that he has and the matchup that he has, I think he's one of the best bets for you. Next guy I want to talk about is Jeff Locke. Jeff Locke is the lefty for Pittsburgh going up against Milwaukee. He's allowed right-handed bats to hit .275 against him with a 1.45 whip. The one guy who really stands out for me is Ryan Braun. Braun has a 398 WOBA, go along with a 231 ISO number. So Braun is somebody that can hit for power and average. He could also steal a couple bases for you now and then. He's going to score a couple runs. He has a chance to knock a few in. So there's a lot of ways that Braun can get you to value. His price is a little bit elevated today, as it normally is. He's one of the best hitters in the game. But I do think that this matchup against Locke is a pretty good one for him. And in Milwaukee, I definitely have no problem rolling him out there. Next guy I want to talk about is Dan Haren. Haren goes up against the Phillies today, and he plays in Citizen Bank Park. He's somebody who's allowed 10 home runs and 48 innings to left-handed bats already this year, which basically puts a guy like Ryan Howard in play. Excuse me. Howard's somebody whose batting average and WOBA have really taken a hit so far this year, but he still has a 231 ISO number, which means that he does have the power to hit home runs if he does make contact. Against a guy like Haren, who's been giving up a lot of home runs to left-handed bats, I definitely think he's somebody that's going to be in play today if you're looking for him. He's only a tournament option. He has a lot of upside, not a lot of safety, but I think he could be one of those sneaky low-owned first base options that you put in your lineup that helps you open up the pathway to a guy like a Scherzer or a Sale as your starting pitcher. Another guy on that Phillies team that can open up that path for you is Cesar Hernandez. On DraftKings, he's only $2,600. Basically, Hernandez doesn't have a lot of power, but he is a guy who does well against right-handed pitching. If he can get on base once or twice, you know he's going to be trying to steal. And at his price, a walk or a hit with a stolen base is all you really need to reach value. If he scores a run or if he gets multiple hits, if he gets more than one stolen base, he's going to be a huge upside play for you at only $2,600. And again, he's another one of those guys that's going to allow you a path to pay up for some of the stud pitching that we have on the slate today. Next guy I want to talk about is Kyle Kendrick. Kendrick is going up against San Diego. He's one of the worst pitchers in the league, and that's backed up by statistics. That's not just my opinion. Left-handed bats are hitting 301 against him with 9 homers in 45 innings. Right-handed bats are hitting 283 against him with 14 home runs in 57 innings. So the one guy that I really like on that San Diego team today is Justin Upton. Upton has a WOBA of 358 with an ISO number of 203. So he has a little bit of pop. He has double-digit home runs already this year against right-handed pitching, and he is somebody who does have a little bit of a reverse splits thing going on where he hits much better for average end power against right-handers than he does against left-handers this year. Next guy I want to talk about is Danny Duffy from Kansas City. Duffy goes up against the Chicago White Sox. Right-handed bats have hit 280 against him with 6 home runs and 49 innings pitched. There's 2 guys that really stand out. So far this year, Chicago's really struggled with left-handed pitchers. So if you look at their team stats, you're going to think that this is actually a good spot for Duffy. But there are a couple guys on that team that have hit left-handed pitching pretty well over their careers. The guy who's leading them this year and who had much better numbers last year is Avisail Garcia. He's a cheap outfield option for you. Should be hitting somewhere in the middle of that White Sox order and is definitely somebody I think you should consider. The other guy that you can look at who's a little bit cheap today as a first base option is Jose Abreu. Abreu has had a bad 2015 so far based on what he did last year. People were expecting more out of him, but his numbers last year are pretty sick against left-handers. He had a WOBA over 400. He had a really high ISO number, I think in the high 200s. So even though he's struggling a little bit this year, he is somebody who hits and sees the ball well against left-handers. And I think he could be one of those lower-owned, high-upside plays in a pretty solid matchup today against Danny Duffy. Remember, Duffy's pitching in Chicago today, not in Kauffman Stadium, so it's also a park downgrade for him. And I think that those White Sox bats can get to him and score a couple runs. Next guy I want to talk about is Justin Verlander. Verlander has a really good start last time out, but the rest of the starts he's had this year have been pretty bad. I'm tending to think that he's probably going to revert back to the mean rather than, continue to strike out a whole bunch of guys and go 8 innings deep into a game with a shutout. There's a couple guys that I think you can look at on that Orioles team. Jonathan Schoop is absolutely on fire right now, and he has the highest WOBA on the team against right-handed pitching. So he's somebody that could be a cheap option for you to look at second base, unless you're playing on DraftKings, where he's $4,000 today over on DraftKings. You could actually get his teammate Jimmy Paredes for only $3,500, and he actually has really good numbers to go up against Verlander as well. He has a 359 WOBA against right-handed pitching this year and a 191 ISO number, which isn't a huge ISO number, but it's pretty good for a second baseman. It's definitely nothing to be ashamed of. The guy who I think is the best bet, though, is probably Manny Machado. He had another home run yesterday, and since they switched this guy to the leadoff spot, he's just been absolutely unbelievable so far this year. His WOBA number against righties is 388. His ISO is 242. So not only is he hitting them well, he's also hitting them for power. He's a guy that's been stealing a couple bases. They've been walking him because they don't want to pitch to him because he's been so hot. So there's a lot of ways that Machado can get you some points. The problem that you're going to have is his price has gone up because his production has been so good. But I still think that this is a good spot. I think that the Orioles get to Verlander. And I think if you roll out Machado, you're not going to be upset about doing it at the end of the day. Next guy to talk about in that same game is Miguel Gonzalez. Gonzalez has allowed 17 home runs and 92 innings pitched. So he's somebody that's giving him up to both sides of the plate. I think he's allowed 8 to left-handers and 9 to right-handers. So anybody with power is going to be in play against him. The 2 guys on Detroit that have some power that you should look at are J.D. Martinez, who has a 398 WOBA with a 298 ISO number, and Yoenis Cespedes, who has a 373 WOBA with a 207 ISO number. Now, neither of these guys has been hitting incredibly well lately, but J.D. Martinez is one of the better hitters in the league. He's shown his power, and he's been hitting well since Miguel Cabrera got hurt. I definitely think that he's somebody that you want to look at. The problem is he's a little bit expensive today. So if you really want him in your lineup, you're going to have to pay up for him. It's not going to be easy. Next guy to talk about is Andrew Cashner. He's going up against Colorado. Cashner's really struggled with left-handed bats. They're hitting 288 against him with 10 home runs and 46 innings pitched, which means a guy like Charlie Blackmon is definitely somebody who's in play today. Blackman's got a 393 WOBA with a 206 ISO number against right-handed pitching, and he's going to be on top of that order. He's stolen 24 bases already this year, so there's a lot of things that he can do that can help you reach value. His price is a little bit expensive over on FanDuel. I think he's like the 3rd or 4th most expensive outfielder. On DraftKings, he's only 4,500, and I definitely think that's a nice price that you can fit into your roster without having to move too many pieces around. The other guy I'd look at on Colorado is Nolan Arenado. Arenado has a 401 WOBA with a pretty sick 338 ISO number against right-handed pitching. He's got over 20 home runs already this year against right-handers, and I definitely think he's somebody that could get a home run today off Cashner. He's going to be low-owned because that game is in Petco Park, but his price is also a little bit of a discount. On DraftKings, he's only 4,100, as opposed to like 48 or 4,900 you have to pay up for Machado. While I do love Machado and I think he's the better cash game play, Arenado does have some upside and is somebody who I think you can include in your tournament rosters. Next guy I want to talk about is Jonathan Nice. Nice for the Mets is struggling with right-handed bats. He's a left-handed pitcher. He's given up a 277 batting average with 10 home runs and 81 innings pitched to right-handers so far this year. Matt Holliday is back from injury, 363 WOBA, bringing it along with him. So he's somebody who I think is in play. His ISO number is only 119, so he's not somebody I'd look at for a home run, but he should be a solid cash game option against a guy like Nice. The guy who has the most upside is the guy who we spoke about yesterday, and that's Randall Grichuk. 361 WOBA, 211 ISO number against left-handed pitching. Hit 2 home runs yesterday. He was in the 8 hole yesterday. I'm hoping against the lefty today they move him up to about the 5 or the 6 spot in the order. Again, he's a young 23-year-old outfielder, has a ton of power, and again, a 361 WOBA that's a pretty good WOBA. Anything over 360 and any ISO number over like 200 is something that really stands out to us. So with the guy who has a 361 WOBA and a 211 ISO number, he's definitely somebody who I think is going to be in play. I'm not expecting him to do what he did yesterday, but I'm very happy that he did it because he helped a lot of people who listened to me and put him in their rosters, even though he had a rough lineup spot batting out of that 8 hole. The other guy on that team I think you can look at is Johnny Peralta. He's one of my favorite options at shortstop today, along with Brandon Crawford. Peralta has the perfect matchup that he wants. He has a 359 WOBA and a 274 ISO number against left-handed pitching. Against left-handed pitching, he's pretty much the biggest power bat that St. Louis Cardinals team has. So I definitely think that he's the guy that can get you a home run today. Getting a home run out of your shortstop position is usually huge because a lot of times that's a position where people pay down for. But he's not too expensive today. I think he's only 4,200 over on DraftKings. I didn't look at his price over on FanDuel, but Peralta is definitely somebody who I think is in play, and I think you should try to get into your rosters if you can. Last guy I wanted to talk about is Tommy Milone, going up for Minnesota against the Athletics today. Malone's allowed a 277 batting average with 6 home runs and 44 innings pitched to right-handed bats. And the one guy who really stands out to me the most is Josh Phegley. Phegley should be catching today for Oakland. He's got a 385 WOBA with a 213 ISO number. So he's somebody that has power and has been hitting, for average against left-handed pitching. His price is really cheap. You can get him on DraftKings at 31. I think he's only about 2,800 on FanDuel as well, so not too restrictive there. And again, you're going to have to find a couple cheap bets if you want to pay up for some of the stud pitching, which I think is something that you're going to want to do today. So these are a couple of the guys that fall into that category for us, and I think these are some of the better plays that you can have. I also think Billy Butler is in a decent spot today. Right-handed bat going up against Milone, the left-hander. He homered yesterday and usually finds himself in the middle of that order. And his price is really cheap. You can get him for like 3,300 or 3,400 on DraftKings. So again, he's another one of those bats that you can use in order to save some money to pay up for the guys like Scherzer and Sale, and not have to completely take a bottom of the barrel starting pitcher too in order to make it work. So that rounds out our Benny's Bat section for today. Like I said, there's a lot of aces on the mound, so there's not a ton of bats. Bats are going to be at a premium, but these are some of the guys who are in the best spots that really stood out for us. Obviously, with guys like Scherzer and Archer and Sale on the mound, there's a lot of upside in tournaments if you want to target bats against those guys. But it's also a very risky play because these are some of the best pitchers that we have in baseball, and they're not very likely to get lit up today. So, again, that was, basically our rundown of the hitters for today. Thank you guys for spending a little bit of, your morning with us. Hopefully you're all sweating your golf tournaments and, having some good results over there. And good luck today in your games. As always, stay classy, DFS.